Good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well and you're not driving your parents and your brothers and sisters crazy. It's Monday afternoon, around a little after 3 o'clock. And yeah, I've been in the house almost the whole time. I was able to take one quick motorcycle ride a couple days ago when it was nice, but the weather hasn't been very good. It's been raining all day. But anyway, I thought I would read to you, and I will be reading to you the article with the Language, Gender, and Culture module. It's called Honor Code by David Brooks. So if you don't have that article in front of you right now, can you please pause the video and take out and access that article? I sent it to you on Google Classroom. It's called Honor Code by David Brooks, and it's from the opinion section of the New York Times, July 5th, 2002. And as you know, because I've told you many times, one of the reasons why I like to read to you is because your listening comprehension is usually about 2 grade levels above your reading comprehension. And then the activities that I've asked you to do this week are mostly based around this particular article. And the other reason why I'd like to read this article to you is because every time I read this article, I think about some of the students in my classroom. You know the ones, especially the male students, who periodically during the class period just get up, go get a tissue, and walk outside because they can't sit there the entire class period for, well, let's see what David Brooks says the reason is. So please follow along while I read. Honor Code by David Brooks, opinion section, New York Times, July 5th, 2002. Henry VIII is one of Shakespeare's most appealing characters. He was rambunctious when young and courageous when older. But suppose Henry went to an American school. By about the 3rd week of nursery school, Henry's teacher would be sending notes saying that Henry had another hard day today. He was disruptive during circle time. By mid-year, there'd be sly little hints dropped that maybe Henry's parents should think about medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Many of the other boys are on it, and they find school much easier. By elementary school, Henry would be lucky to get 20-minute snatches of recess. During one, he'd jump off the jungle gym, and by the time he hit the ground, the supervising teachers would be all over him for breaking the safety rules. He'd get in a serious wrestling match with his buddy Falstaff, and by the time he got him in a headlock, there'd be suspensions all around. First, Henry would withdraw. He'd decide that the official school culture is for wimps and softies, and he'd just disengage. In kindergarten, he'd wonder why he just couldn't be good. By junior high, he'd lose interest in trying and his grades would plummet. Then he'd rebel. If the official high school culture was uber nurturing, he'd be uber crude. If it valued cooperation and sensitivity, he'd devote his mental energies to violent video games and aggressive music. If college wanted him to be focused and tightly ambitious, he'd exile himself into a lewd and unsupervised laddie subculture. He'd have vague high ambitions but no realistic way to realize them. Day to day, he'd look completely adrift. This is roughly what's happening in schools across the Western world. The education system has become culturally cohesive, rewarding and encouraging a certain sort of person, one who is nurturing, collaborative, disciplined, neat, studious, industrious, and ambitious. People who don't fit this cultural ideal respond by disengaging and rebelling. Far from all, but many of the people who don't fit in are boys. A decade or so ago, people started writing books and articles on the boy crisis. At the time, the evidence was disputable and some experts pushed back. Since then, the evidence that boys are falling behind has mounted. The case is closed. The numbers for boys gets worse and worse. By 12th grade, male reading test scores are far below female test scores. The eminent psychologist Michael Thompson mentioned at the Aspen Ideas Festival a few days ago that 11th grade boys are now writing at the same level as 8th grade girls. Boys used to have an advantage in math and science, but that gap is nearly gone. Boys are much more likely to have discipline problems. An article as far back as 2004 in the magazine Educational Leadership found that boys accounted for nearly 3/4 of the D's and F's. Some colleges are lowering the admissions requirement just so they can admit a decent number of men. Even so, men make up just over 40% of college students. 2 million fewer men graduated from college over the past decade than women. The performance gap in graduate school is even higher. Some of the decline in male performance may be genetic. The information age rewards people who mature early, who are verbally and socially sophisticated, who can control their impulses. Girls may, on average, do better at these things. Excuse me. After all, boys are falling behind, not just in the U.S., but all 35 member nations of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But the big story here is cultural and moral. If schools want to re-engage Henry, they can't pretend they can turn him into a reflective Hamlet just by feeding him his meds and hoping he'll sit quietly at story time. If schools want to educate a fiercely rambunctious girl, they can't pretend they will successfully tame her by assigning her some of those exquisitely sensitive Newbery Award-winning novellas. Social engineering is just not that easy. Schools have to engage people as they are. That requires leaders who insist on more cultural diversity in school. Not just teachers who celebrate cooperation, but other teachers who celebrate competition. Not just teachers who honor environmental virtues, but teachers who honor military virtues. Not just curriculums that teach how to share, but curriculums that teach how to win and how to lose. Not just programs that work like friendship circles, but programs that work like boot camp. The basic problem is that schools praise diversity, but have become culturally homogenous. The education world has become a distinct subculture with a distinct ethos and attracting a distinct sort of employee. Students who don't fit that ethos get left out. Little Prince Hal has a lot going on inside. He's not the unfeeling, uncommunicative, testosterone-driven cretin of common boy stereotypes. He's just inspired by a different honor code. He doesn't find inspiration in school, but he should. So, one thing that might come out of this distance learning is that I've always felt that we have to have a new way of educating students, that the normal 8 through 3, 6 periods a day don't work for a lot of students in today's society because they have other obligations. So part of this whole distance learning might really teach us another way to enhance education for our students. Tomorrow, when we do a video conference, we're going to talk about what Mr. Brooks's major point in his article is, and we're also going to talk about how he wrote this essay. Do you remember that I'm always grinding on you that when you do an introduction and a conclusion, you should try somehow to tie your introduction in with your conclusion using an anecdote or some same words and phraseology that you used in your introduction. it kind of wraps up your whole essay and ties it all together. If you notice, Mr. Brooks did that very skillfully, using the Shakespeare characters to tie up his point at the end of his essay. So, anyway, I hope that you were able to follow along and that this helped your reading comprehension for this article in the module that we're currently studying. And I hope to see you all tomorrow online. Stay safe and be well.